Germany and the US, an alliance of equals? In the interview, director of the American Academy in Berlin, Gary Smith.
Gary Smith, President Obama will shortly be arriving here in Berlin. It will be his first official state visit, as it were, to Berlin since he first took up office back in 2009. From your perspective as director of the American Academy, what can you tell us about why it's taken so long?
Of course, I have no real insight into this, but it's not really an issue that it's taken so long because the important symbols are all there. Chancellor Merkel was the first European head of state that he received in Washington and gave a state dinner for. There was a lot of competition for that position, and there's no question that she is, in his eyes, the most important head of state in Europe. And he showed it in that way. He showed it by giving her the Medal of Freedom, which is an extraordinary, statement
Absolutely.
of admiration. Even if it was also a diplomatic gesture. And, I think the news of their, fractious beginnings of the relationship, if that's even true, are a long history. They have had a very intense exchange through all of the insecure period of the Euro crisis, direct exchange as well as the most intense exchange among a broad range of ministries and high-level diplomats and bureaucrats that I've seen in the 27 years I've lived here.
It's very interesting what you're saying there, interesting insights. And of course, for all European countries, the relationship with the US, with Washington, is very important. The Brits, for example, always talk about their special relationship with the United States based on language, but also on shared values. Given what you're saying, would you say that Germany and the United States have a special relationship?
They do, even though the Germans can't believe it and they keep asking neurotically, do you still care about us? We see that you're turning towards Asia. I mean, one can do two things at one time. In fact, the United States has to do many things at one time because it has been for a period the world's only superpower, and the United States takes its responsibilities to the extent that it can, deploy resources far beyond what any other country in the world does or even considers doing. It takes it seriously. Now, of course, there is a special relationship to Great Britain. I was speaking of the continent and the Eurozone, and it's just very clear.
Okay, let's talk about President Obama himself. The last time he was here, he was not the president. He was a presidential candidate, a candidate who stood for hope, who stood for change, who stood for audacity. What does he stand for now?
He stands for what every president at the beginning of a second term stands. He stands for pragmatism, for somebody who is trying to articulate a strategic vision, whether it's a grand strategy, I doubt, but a strategic vision, and deploy partners to help implement this vision. In the case of Obama, and this is just my own personal conjecture, it's clear to most Americans on both sides of the aisles that the United States cannot fulfill the role that has been given to it of of taking responsibility for everything. And so, given the rise of China, given globalization and the urgency of climate change, Al-Qaeda, all sorts of problems, health, poverty issues, financial instability, the United States understands it has to share power. Now, we will all share power with the Chinese, but who can we sit down with to help design how one shares power and includes the countries with whom one doesn't have successful and deep relations? Well, obviously, the U.S. and Europe. And when you say Europe, you say Germany.
Yeah, but the Americans are always saying, it's a constant call that we hear from Washington, that they're saying to the Germans specifically, take more responsibility.
That's
What
right.
does that clarion call really mean?
You know what
in
it means?
concrete terms?
It's very interesting. I'm glad you asked, because I was struck, standing in Berlin when he gave the speech 5 years ago, as somebody who has lived in this country for many years, that here was responsibility is always an issue, because Germany lost the moral high. Germans are very aware that they lost the moral high ground in the middle of the last century, and you can understand many things that happen here, many debates through that prism. You can also understand the over-emotionality of the relationship to the United States and to Israel, and the quickness to criticize in some circumstances where it seems silly, or to focus on these two countries where others should be looked at as well in certain contexts. Privacy, look at France.
That's one backdrop to President Obama's visit. Another backdrop, which we really have to mention, is the fact that it takes place at the time where we here in Berlin are marking the 50th anniversary of Ich bin ein Berliner. I'm a Berliner. You are a Berliner too. How important is that? It's very important, isn't it?
It's very important. And I know that he's looking for, historical examples, cases, things that will symbolize his message. Whether he puts the words in his mouth or not, the relationship with the Chancellor and our extraordinarily effective ambassador in Germany are the reasons that he's here.
Okay.
And because we cannot indulge ourselves with insecurity about this relationship. This is a relationship that has to have results. So he's coming here to make a speech. He's coming here to work, and history will judge this visit, not on the speech, but on whether or not Germany and the United States implement the things that they discuss.
Okay. Point taken. Let's move on to culture, cultural exchange. It's your field, it's your business, as it were.
That's right.
Yeah. Americans have always travelled a lot, much more than many people here in Europe think. They've always been fascinated by European cities, by Paris, by Rome, by London. Yeah. Now they're coming to Berlin in huge numbers. Culturally and intellectually, what are they looking for and what are they finding?
That is such a good question.
Thank you.
That's a tough question. Well, what they're finding is something. I was always skeptical about the myth of Berlin, because when Arthur Miller came to us, 15 years ago, in 1998, then television teams would follow him throughout the city and ask, "So, Mr. Miller, 1998, don't you think Berlin is like New York?" So Berliners desperately wanted this city to be cosmopolitan and erase, several decades from their history. In fact, despite the Berliners, despite the provincialism of this city has become cosmopolitan.
The new New York.
Well,
some people say.
It has, the arts world is analogous to the pre-market moment in New York of the 50s. There's no question about that. It's sustainable. The tech scene, I never would have believed this, given Bavaria and all the infrastructure. I have business angels, people coming from all over the West Coast to invest in companies, to mentor companies. It's extraordinary what's happening. The European School of Management Technologies is focusing on the management of technology. This city, which has always reinvented itself, is doing so again. And it's always been the most liberal of cities in Germany. It's almost extraterritorial in a way.
The comparison with New York again there.
Yes.
Let me just ask you about you personally, because you
Austin.
talked. Yeah. Okay. Austin, Texas. Yeah, your hometown. Yeah. Let's go back into you. You talked about their erasing decades of German history. Your mother was forced to flee Germany, 1939, I believe, as a young girl, 6 years old, I
Yes.
think.
Oh my God, you've done your research.
Yeah. How do you build a bridge from that troubled chapter in your own personal history to Germany today, the Germany and the Berlin you see around you?
You're really good. First of all, as you can imagine, I came to this country for the first time in the mid-'70s to study, first language courses. Then I came through the fellowship program from 78 to 80. Then I started editing books and doing research and coming back and forth. My mother didn't come back for 63 years until my son was bar mitzvahed in an Art Deco synagogue in East Berlin. There's still people that don't come, but this is a different place. The reason I'm here and a few others like me is because our original motive, given the options of teaching in Chicago or being a dean in New York or something, is that, and this sounds, well, it is the way it sounds, is that to live here as a Jew, but not as a public Jew, but as a normal part of the society and play a role, is to deny Hitler his victory, is to make Germany is to help make Germany into something else. I grew up with Yiddish and German, with von Kleist books and Murica poems. This is my culture. I mean, when I came here, I would go to New York and to Jerusalem and to Berlin or Frankfurt, and recognize the food, the expressions, and the sort of intellectual perspective, the moral perspective. So that is what brings people like me here, and I have changed with this relationship and grown just as like this country has grown. The questions I asked when I came here in the 70s, and I'm sure that every young German traveling to Holland and to Boston, they're asked these questions, but the questions have changed. The discussion has changed, I must say.
Fascinating stuff. Gary Smith, thank you very much for sharing that with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Asking so many tough questions.